Hi everyone, thanks for coming today. Thank you for having us. My name is Deborah Loy, I'm the CEO of SISTA. SISTA is an organization that aims to reduce funding gap between male and female entrepreneurs. I'm thrilled to be here today with three amazing women. We'll be talking about space tech to begin this afternoon. I just wanted to quickly introduce you girls so that everyone knows what you're doing here on Earth and somewhere else in the universe as well. Claudie, you're an astronaut. Your first experience in space took place in 1996 with the Franco-Russian mission Cassiope. And in 21, you were the first French woman to join the International Space Station. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, that was well deserved. Hélène, you are the founder and CEO of the Exploration Company, a deep tech startup that is building a spaceship to go to the moon and come back. You're also an investor in various startups in the space tech, and also the creator of a foundation that aims at creating international trust in the space sector. Thank you so much for being with us today. Yeah, big round of applause as well. Thank you. And Barbara, you're the founder and CEO of Interstellar Lab, a company that develops food production and habitation modules for sustainable living on Earth and space. Thank you again. So space has been a talked about topic in the tech world, especially because or thanks to Elon Musk and SpaceX. The first challenge, of course, for humankind has been to access to space, and it has been a big race, of course, over the years. And today it is a big field of opportunities for companies. Claudie, could you maybe tell us how you saw this question of access to space evolve through the years?
Okay, thank you very much, Deborah. I'm very pleased to be with you today. So you say that maybe I can tell a little bit about the history, because I'm a witness of two centuries, I would say, the 20th and the 21st century. So I am an astronaut, and I would say I'm purely the drive for me to open this dream to become an astronaut came with Generation Apollo, with the human landing in July 69. I was 12 at that time, and that's true that it was the main point for me to try to push my boundary and to try to enter in this space field with success. And I want to remember that in '85, when I've been selected by the French agency, it was the time of the possibility of an autonomous access to space by the European entities. It was a time of Hermes space shuttle, and at the time, so Europe was part of the game and the possibility to do. Then I went to training in Star City for 10 years. I lived there in Russia, and I've been trained to use the Soyuz system, Soviet and Russian system after that, to go to the station. So it was a wonderful opportunity, and I would say at that time it was purely scientific cooperation and diplomatic opportunity to have this access in cooperation with Russia. And I have seen really a wonderful human diplomatic adventure in between 92 and 2001 with this purely French-Russian, and then the arrival of the European astronauts, and then the Shuttle Mir program with the American coming to the Mir station. So you can imagine what it was at that time to have this engineering melting pot, I would say, and finishing with the building of the International Space Station, where I did my second flight. So I had this possibility to see all this evolution coming mainly from geopolitical stakes, I would say, and institutional agencies. So that's true that entering in the 21st century, we have not at all the same landscape. I'm sure that Hélène and Barbara will talk about access to space for all the economical purposes and things like that, but I'm just talking about the human spaceflight access to space. And so you have seen Elon Musk and the new actors in the field, with even the development of space tourism. And you are aware that yesterday a Soyuz capsule sent in the space station a producer and an actress to make a movie in the International Space Station. So we are really in an other landscape, an interesting one, emulating one, I would say, for the next years to come. But coming to your part of the question about how European ambition is today, I would say that for me that's important, that this aspect of an autonomous access for human spaceflight on the European side must be put on the table in order to be discussed with lucidity, but also with ambition in order to take a decision, because this aspect of human spaceflight is one part of the whole added value chain of space activities. And you need to be there and to have proposal and to have initiative in that field if you want to be a real partner in this endeavor for the future and for humanity. So, I mean, if you want to be at the table of international regulation, discussion, so it's really important for me to take this stake at the high level of importance and to make the decision. That will be the decision Europe will make about that. But if you want really to be part of the game and to be at the table of negotiation, you have to ask you the question of the access for human spaceflight from the European side.
Of course, now is the time. It's interesting. So you mentioned that you used the Russian system, so used to go to the International Space Station. Of course, Elon Musk has put the US back on this stage with Spacex, a private company. So my question for you, Hélène, is you are yourself building a spacecraft that should be able to go to the moon and come back. Can you tell us a little bit about this venture and maybe the main challenges you are facing in building it?
Yes, of course. So perhaps a little bit the reason also of this endeavor. The access to space has completely changed in the past, I would say, 20 years. 20 years, it would cost you about $25,000 to send 1 kilogram to space. Today, it's about 2,500, and tomorrow, let's say in 2-3 years, it will be probably 250. So 20 years and moving from 25,000 to 250. And this has opened a world of amazing possibilities. And among these possibilities, we have the chance to experience right now the beginning of a multiplanetary species. This is happening now in the sense that the critical infrastructures to live on the moon, so habitats, but also transportation, but also energy, but also communication, are going to be operational in the next 5 to 6 years. Perhaps 10 years if there is some delay, but that's the order of magnitude. It's not science fiction, it's not 20 years, it's this decade. And this decade also probably the first spaceship of Elon Musk will go to Mars. So this is happening now. And the question, to come back to what Claudie was saying, is what are we doing here in Europe to be part of this game? Because it's exactly like in the 16th century where when people were exploring the new world, the companies, the nations that were audacious enough to explore, they dominated this world because of the technologies they developed and because of the strategic positions that they took. And we have exactly the same question right now, and this new world is not a new world on Earth, it's the new space world. So our ambition with our company is simply to enable Europe to be a very credible and very strong player in this new space world, which starts with microgravity, so around the Earth, Moon, and then potentially Mars. And what does mean credibility? It means being there at the right speed, with the right technology. And this is critical for Europe. I will not quote any project, but we've seen, unfortunately, in the past, very ambitious or very, let's say, costly projects coming to the market and not at the right speed and not at the right level of technology. And this is then a real problem. So this is our very first objective, and the reason why we are a team of 8 people today, half of it had the chance to work on a lunar vehicle that's going to be flown this year. So we will this year go around the moon and come back. So we left Airbus and decided to build a startup with that mission in mind. Of course, we need to be a business. So the way we're going to, let's say, be profitable, on the one hand, we'll sell missions, and we will have more and more space agencies, but also private players buying mission, for the very simple reason that this exploration of the new world will be done with space companies, for sure, but will be done also with non-space companies. It will not be a space company that's going to drill the moon to extract water on the moon, so that with the moon you can have life and you can have also energy to propel other spacecraft. It will not be a space company that's going to build habitats. So we will have public players and a lot of public clients at the beginning, because it will start driven by the public money, because it's new. And step by step, there will be a new economy that will build on the shoulder of this public investment. And of course, we want to serve it.
Amazing. So Barbara, you evolved in the finance space for a few years in the finance industry, and then you created a startup in space tech. Can you tell us a little bit what business opportunity you saw in that field, and more precisely what your startup is about?
Sure. So yeah, I spent most of my career before in finance, as you were saying, financing companies developing hardware, robotics products. And then actually my move to space is coming from a terrestrial approach. I was first looking at how can we develop, so after investing in a lot of different hardware startup, I left and I was focusing on how we can bring holistic approach on her for water treatment, waste management and food production. And at the time I was studying that, it was exactly at the same time where the new space age started, 2017 we can say, with the boosters coming back from Spacex. And so I realized that the dream of going to the moon again and then in the future to Mars was going to happen. As Hélène said, we actually have the coming decade, this is where everything's going to happen. We're going to go back to the moon and we're going to develop habitat and structure. And by thinking of this process of going to the moon, developing the habitat, the food production system, I realized that there was a strong link between the technology that were needed in space and what we need on Earth. And so that's how I came up with this idea of Interstellar Lab, which is using space design, sometimes space technology, to design and to develop deployable system for crop cultivation on Earth, food production, and for life support in space. And so we're a young startup, started in 2018, a team of 20 people, mostly located in France right now. And we're developing those modules, first for terrestrial application, and we have the coming years to prepare to have a product that we can eventually put on the moon very, very soon, we hope.
Amazing. So I mentioned Elon Musk earlier. I feel like the rhetoric of Musk has been very about conquering new planets, about having this new planet B. And as a newbie, so I knew basically nothing about space tech before preparing for this panel, and I really had this image of that like we need to drop the Earth and go live on another planet, because that's the rhetoric that has been using around it. So I kind of want to ask you, Claudie, like, what are we doing this for? Like this space exploration, why are we doing it? And is it really because at some point we will have to run away from this planet, which I personally really love?
Okay, so you say this conquest spirit. I would add that I think we are motivated also by a quest and not just a conquest. And that's really deeply in our human spirit to explore, to push the boundaries and to go further. So the first element to dissociate a little bit with the conquest spirit. Then, having been in orbit, in 400 kilometers from the planet Earth and looking through the window, that's prove that I am an ambassador of the planet. The planet is so beautiful, but also so fragile and vulnerable that we love to transmit to you, to share this feeling of emotion and consideration for the planet. So this aspect of ecological awareness, I would say, I'm not the one that will say that we have to leave our planet Earth to find a new planet, a planet B. It's not at all the purpose of the exploration that I'm for. Exploration, so this aspect of human quest. The aspect of research exploration. As you know now, for the International Space Station, there is a lot of laboratories working in this environment of microgravity, and that's wonderful. I am a medical doctor, so imagine that you are in microgravity with a change of parameters. You will see appearing some symptoms as cognitive mishaps, postural changes, cardiovascular changes, musculoskeletal changes, and this is a perfect model for the scientific community of aging. When you are in aging process, you have all these different things. And the model of microgravity for the scientists is something very interesting. Aging, very fast, accelerated process, but reversible. So this is something wonderful for more knowledge to gain. And in the station, for the time being, there is, for example, brain organoids in order to begin this kind of research in microgravity. So research is completely part. Fundamental research, basic research also when you're speaking, I'm just speaking about ISS, but speaking about Mars, as you said, Mars, that's the way to try to understand why this planet a few billion years ago was exactly the same as the Earth, with an atmosphere, with water, and it's now a desert, and we are trying to think, maybe to find somewhere some old traces of life. So that's also something in the quest of all these important questions for humanity. So this basic research is there. And then applied research, and maybe we will develop the fact that commercial space is there. In microgravity, it can be also around the moon, in cislunar, on the lunar surface, and Barbara, I'm sure, is involved in some research projects that can have commercial purposes in trying to have this duality between Earth and moon and the benefits that we may gain. And so commercial and private research, and I would say also an applied research in order to give the possibility to go further in the exploration. There is still a lot of question marks in the feasibility of Mars mission, a human space Mars mission, even if Elon Musk has planned already, I think, the first landing of Starship in the 30 decades. I'm not sure that I will see the first landing in Mars, but okay, that's emulating to have this kind of competition. So why not leaving the planet, but trying to make our research in exploration beneficial to Earth too? And I think we will develop that, because I'm thinking there is a lot of things that can be done through this new installation on the moon, for example, with scarce resources, energy, all these aspects that are real terrestrial stakes. But we have to look with a new glance and a new point of view.
I really like the change of narrative you put in place by coming from conquest to quest. So Barbara, that's exactly what you're doing, right? What Claudie is describing, that we could go to space and use the time we spend in space to resolve some issues we have here on Earth. Can you give us more concrete and specific examples on how we can do that?
Sure. I think, and also to go back to 1969, this is something I forgot to mention, but the reason why it's very interesting, if you look at what happened when we went to the moon, it's exactly at the same time when the consciousness of the planet and the awareness of what was going on with climate was bringing to the light of us, because we saw for the first time the Earth from space, and there was this kind of realization, and there were the first movement, Greenpeace, WWF, exactly started at this time. So we went to space to really think about Earth, and so space is bringing us this perspective of going out and look at our planet and realizing things. It's very important also to notice that if we were not going into space, we couldn't have satellites, we couldn't understand the climate of our planet. So the whole question of how space is benefiting the Earth, I think it's pretty obvious right now. But another thing is the technology, so how we bring back the technology. So if you look at the International Space Station, for instance, all the systems that have been developing to purify the water, they're very useful right now. There was one example that is coming from ESA, who has been developing a water treatment plant in North Africa using the same membranes that they were using in the International Space Station. So there are a lot of systems. When you design a system for space, it has to be very resilient, very light, because what is expensive is the cost of putting something in space, and it should last a very long time. I mean, on the principle. Then there is of course different requirements, terrestrial application, microgravity application, lunar application is very different. But you come up with very interesting technology. And so on water treatment, air purification system, there are tons of application, tons of spin-off technology that we can use on Earth. And if I take the example of our cases, the first product, which is a dome, an inflatable dome, that is designed right now for terrestrial application. Like the dome we designed, the first one, you cannot put on the moon. It will never work. We still have a lot of iteration on design and system to do. But the way we conceptualized it was we started with, what if we had to feed a group of astronauts who's going to live sustainably without having any other access to other foods on another planet. And so we designed a system that is self-contained and that is regenerative. We recycle the water, recycle the waste, recycle everything within a bubble, and in a closed environment. And this approach led us to a system that is a very sustainable food production unit for Earth. And so that's looking at things sometimes from another perspective. It's unleashing, you're thinking out of the box, and so you come up with a very innovative approach with different constraints, and then you apply that back on Earth, and you have a product that is useful. So I think there is tons of technology, a ton of things that we will keep on learning from going into space. I'm very, very hopeful for the station on the moon to bring a lot of knowledge and technology here, so we can fight more against climate change, find solutions to protect biodiversity. Yeah.
Amazing, so exciting. So Hélène, we're in a room full of business people here at Station F. You're also an investor in the space tech. Can you tell us a little bit more about what business opportunities you see in this field for the years to come? Maybe give some inspiration to the room.
Yes, of course. So if we look at the business opportunities, I would say right now and then in the next perhaps 5 years. So right now we have, let's say, some companies which are already taking important places. So I'm speaking about startup here. So in IoT communication, so machine-to-machine communication, companies that typically started 5-6 years ago. And so many of them in the world, and now we see, let's say, the main player emerging. So for typically, I would say Series B, growth investment, this is the right time to invest in this company. We have, of course, more companies which are using the data from space. And the company, in my perspective, which are working the most, are the ones which are hyper-specialized. And if we think back to the example of Amazon, they started with books and then they went to other markets. It's a bit the same with data from space. I believe you need to know your customer extremely well so that you can really not simply provide data, but actually provide information. And to provide information, you need to know what kind of information your customer needs. So we've seen that in the past where lots of, let's say, general data providing commercial data providers companies have faced some difficulties, and now we see a second wave of much more specialized space data company, which I think will be more successful. To give a few concrete examples, can be to monitor pipelines to see leaks, for example, can be to monitor forest fires, can also be to monitor the logistics of oil and gas. So many examples, but each example equals more or less one company. I think there is now, I was speaking about, let's say, space 1.0, space 2.0, 1.0 is really the democratization of Earth to space. This has been done by Spacex, and you have many small launchers companies who have followed afterwards, 2 of them being IPO'd in the first semester of this year, Rocket Lab and Astra, and probably some others will follow. But I think now we are in the space 2.0 area, where the question is, what do we do when we are here in orbit? Part of it is to explore and to go further. This is, for example, what my company is doing, but part of there is also to leverage and or monitor what is happening in orbit. So you have more companies working on debris, can be simply, because we're going to have a real debris problem. Just to give you an idea, SpaceX is going to put approximately 20,000 satellites in low Earth orbit to provide broadband communication to every machines and everyone on the planet. And of course, since this is a very strategic project, China is also going to do the same, and Europe is thinking about doing the same too. So you end up with more or less, let's say, 60,000 satellites here in the next 5 to 6 years, which means a lot of new objects around ourselves, and then the risk of having an accident increasing significantly. So you have companies which are, the first step, of course, is to identify the risk. So you have more companies working on that, and then the second step, of course, is to remove this debris, and you have more companies also working on this. Last but not least, I'd like to speak a little bit, of course, about exploration, which is in 2 steps. You have more companies focused on the transportation market of exploration, so going to the moon, going further, and then also companies focusing on really setting up the human presence. So you have, for example, a company in Israel, which is working on extracting the oxygen of the regolith of the moon, so to produce either energy and or simply oxygen so that people can use it to breathe. You have also 3D printing companies focusing on producing habitats on the moon. So this is more like down the road and more at seed stage, but it's also areas which are happening right now in the investment field.
Amazing. I think if there are investors in the room, just know that time to invest is now, time to enter this market is now, and don't hesitate too much. We've been mentioning, of course, the sustainability question, which is a big one. Claudie, do you feel like we are entering in a more, we are moving towards a more sustainable future in the space field?
Well, this aspect of sustainability is very important, and I'm happy to hear that we are also concerned by this space debris, but because that's the first element of sustainability, having an access to space and not be disturbed by this problem. So coming back to the fact that we need to organize negotiation for regulation and the statute of the different elements, that's one point for sustainability, because that's a multilateral international endeavor. It's part of a space race in one side, but also a cooperative element for exploration. The aspect of sustainability is also the one of this economical sustainability, so that we need to have this duality between the terrestrial stakes and lunar or stakes. There is the aspect that has not been mentioned here, but I think we have to have that in mind: peaceful purposes and the problem of militarization, arsenalization of space, and we see the development in the US, in France, in China, of this aspect of space security with duality purposes, so that's also something to take into account. And I think for sustainability, we need to find the right balance between conflicting priorities. When I'm speaking about space in the university, for example, I've often now this feeling that priority must be given to Earth's preservation and not to exploration. and I would like to find the right narrative and equilibrium and balance in between this, that in my mind are not conflicting, but both interesting. And if we don't care for that, we will have a problem, I think, of sustainability, and I don't want to give up the dream for exploration.
Amazing, thank you very much. I think we're running out of time, but Barbara, if you want to say like a quick word about sustainability and the future and how we can conjugate both, protecting the earth and keep on exploring.
Very, very briefly, but I agree with what Claudie just said. It's very important to keep the dream for space exploration. There is this link between Earth, and it should be one or the other. It's both together, and it's important to find the right narrative in the coming years, because it shall not be only a question of okay, I'm going to be a bit controversial, but male billionaire building rockets. It's that and conquest of space. That's not the point of space exploration. So.
Yeah, that's why I thought it's really interesting to change the narrative and maybe a more European and maybe a more female narrative towards this topic could actually help. Hélène, about the sustainability, that's also a business opportunity, right? You mentioned it earlier.
Yes, it's a business opportunity, and when we, for example, made the choice of our propellant, we chose a propellant which is less toxic than the current propellant we are using currently to go to space. It's also an obligation that I have signed with regards to my company, so we are going to be carbon neutral. Last but not least, I just would like to give a very concrete example of how space contributes to sustainability on top of providing images for climate changes and enabling us to understand the mechanism of the climate, and also fighting against when we speak about identifying forest fires, for example. There is one very simple thing in space. You need to be extremely frugal and extremely autonomous. So the two very basic points. And on Earth, we're going to be more and more autonomous. This is absolutely clear. And if we are not able to bring this frugality with these autonomous machines, car, robot, etc., we're going to have immense energy needs. And every space company is working on how to invent new types of chipsets, for example, or new algorithm with new chipsets that would bring, for example, artificial intelligence that would use very, very less energy than we are currently using. So that's a very concrete example which is on huge importance for the future of Earth. And there are many others, but I just wanted to mention this one because it's, I think, very obvious.
So in conclusion, if we use the same mindset you use in space on Earth, we will do better than we did in the past years, right? I don't know if we have questions from the audience. I think there's supposed to be on the screen, but I'm not seeing any. Okay. Yeah, okay, they just appeared. So what are the current challenges of space tech, and how can individuals get involved to contribute in its flourishing? I don't know who wants to answer that. If anyone wants to contribute, what's the best way of doing it?
Yeah, perhaps I am happy to try to answer. So I think, so what's the current challenges of SpaceX, and how can individuals contribute to its flourishing? I think it depends where we are. If we're in the US, there is a very, very strong partnerships between, on the one hand, the Space Administration and, in general, the public administration, and on the other hand, the entrepreneurs and the startup ecosystem. And there is open competition between big players and small players, and this competition is nurtured by NASA with very specific type of contracts, which are basically service contracts. In Europe, we've not been able so far to move to that point. We are still using what is called development contracts, so the European Space Agency or the states would pay for a specific development. And this is restraining competition. And I think at the end, this is restraining the competitivity of our industry as a whole. Would it be big corporate players or would it be small startups? So I think one current challenge here in Europe is to, and we, each of us, startups, corporates, agencies, have a common responsibility is to together build an ecosystem which is more competitive, because it will bring more efficiency. And a second challenge, which I see, and this is global, is the cooperation. And this is the reason why I had the chance to found the Carman project. Space is, for me, like the sea. When someone has a problem, whatever his nationality or her nationality is, first and foremost, this is a human being, and we're going to help that person. And I think this was completely true, I can imagine, in the International Space Station. And space is also a place where, despite Cold War or real war on Earth, we are still here to cooperate. And this was the typical example of the International Space Station that was built together with the Russians and the Americans at the time of the Cold War. This is not anymore the case today, or at least I see clearly here a threat, because we have, on the one hand, the Chinese space station, on the other hand, the International Space Station, with the Russian having allied with China just a few months ago. And we're going to have, in the next 5 to 6 years, 2 stations orbiting around the Earth and 2 stations on the Moon also. So I think one challenge is, being part of this space development, how can we contribute to bring back this cooperation spirit, which is at the very core of this exploration endeavor.
Well, one last question, maybe Claudie. Oh, yeah.
Maybe if I add a third point, I completely agree with what was said previously by Hélène, and I think there is a path for a European voice in this discussion of cooperation. And the third element, I think, for the entrepreneurs that are there too, is the fact that space and non-space has to cooperate. And that means space is a global enabler for all the development in technology and everything. So space and non-space is not yet on stage now.
And there was a question about, do we have in Europe a way to use public money to help companies to develop space tech? I don't know who wants to answer that.
Yes, I'm happy to give some, but Barbara. I think we as a startup, first and foremost, we have to stick with the startup model. So space is hard, space is long, but we have to have gates which make it possible for venture capitalists to invest into our startups. And we need to think about our technical gates as gates which have some familiarity for investors. And we need to, from the very, very start, think about when I'm going to get my first contract, and if I cannot get a first contract within the next 2 to 3 years because simply I have nothing to sell, how can I prove that I have commercial traction without getting contracts? So that I have a proxy which is understandable for private investors, and he can say, okay, I can more or less understand the traction of the startup and I can compare it to the other companies in my portfolio. And I think this is on us. This is not on the government or whatsoever. This is on us to think our business model and develop a company in a way which is understandable and which fits with, I would say, VC typical standards. Then with regards to the government, and we come back to, I think, what we were saying before, there is a lot of initiative, and I'm very, very grateful that we have more and more funding for space in general, for space startups, and also the support, for example, the European Investment Fund, which invests into venture funds so that these venture funds will invest into space startup. This is very important because we are super late compared to the US. Europe is less than 3% in total of VC investment in the space tech globally, so we are very late. But most importantly, I think and I come back to what I was saying at the beginning, we have to bring more competition in this whole ecosystem and not to think about me, government, I need to fund a development. No, the company has to find its own business model. Me, government, I can be an anchor customer for this company. So I can contract with this company for example, 1 or 2 or 3 missions per year, but then the company has to be profitable itself, including the development cost or part of the development cost. And this is what the US put in place some 15 years ago, and I think this is what we need to put in place in Europe right now.
Amazing. I think we're running out of time. Claudie, if you want to say a few words as a conclusion, maybe on Europe and.
Well, as a conclusion, maybe because I am a silver person from the past century, I think we must go to being smart, being now wise. And I think that's something that is important. And another point of conclusion, space is a wonderful tool for an education that inspires, and we need to be inspired.
We do. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. Have an amazing... I'm now leaving the stage to Chris O'Brien for the next panel that's going to be about climate change.